The gavel slammed down with a deafening crack, rattling the glass and shaking the wood of the bench. Gasps echoed through the courtroom, but the room fell eerily silent when the trembling witness, Emma Blake, spoke. "I saw it," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, but enough to send shockwaves through the gallery. On the stand, her eyes darted nervously, the truth spilling out like water from a broken dam. A juror, Michael Hayes, gripped the armrest tightly, knuckles white with tension. In the back, a reporter, Claire Johnson, stopped mid-sentence, her eyes wide as she processed the revelation. A coffee cup slipped from a spectator's hands, spilling dark liquid across the polished floor. The air thickened with the weight of the words, and it was clear. The game had changed. Lives would be shattered before the day was through. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Emma Blake sat frozen in her chair, struggling to process the weight of the revelation. Detective Jack Turner's testimony had shattered her defense. Olivia Grant leaned forward, her voice dripping with triumph. "You've heard it, ladies and gentlemen," she said. "The defendant's own investigator has confirmed the evidence was mishandled. How can we trust her innocence now?" Emma felt the blood drain from her face as she locked eyes with Turner. His betrayal stung more than the case itself. The walls were closing in. The courtroom was alive with whispers, but Emma Blake could hardly hear them. She had been preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, the truth felt like a heavy weight. Olivia Grant's tactics were relentless, and Turner's betrayal felt like a dagger in her side. How could this be happening? Emma thought, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. The prosecution had her cornered, and with each word Olivia spoke, it felt like a nail in the coffin. Emma knew her back was against the wall, but there was no giving up now. She had to fight. Emma Blake barely registered the next moments as they passed. She was caught in a haze of disbelief, but then came the turning point. Olivia Grant's voice cut through the fog. "We have new evidence." Emma's heart stopped. What more could they possibly have? Grant reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, placing it on the table with a flourish. "A letter," she said, "written by Sarah Williams herself, implicating Emma Blake as the murderer." The courtroom fell silent as the words sank in. Emma looked at Turner. How had this happened? How had they gotten this letter? As the letter was read aloud, Emma Blake's mind raced. Sarah Williams had written that letter. The room spun around her as the words sunk in. Emma had been named as the person Sarah feared the most. "This is impossible," Emma whispered to herself. Olivia Grant's voice cut through her thoughts, each word a hammer strike. The victim's last wish was to expose Emma for the crime she committed. Emma wanted to scream, to deny everything, but the room seemed to close in around her. Every doubt she had ever had about Turner's role was now confirmed. The courtroom hummed with whispered conversations, but all attention shifted to Detective Jack Turner as he stepped into the witness box once again. His confident demeanor, once unshaken, now seemed brittle under the scrutiny. Olivia Grant, the prosecutor, leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Detective, you've testified that the evidence was flawless. But if that's the case, why did you fail to follow the basic protocol during the investigation?" The room held its breath as Turner stammered slightly, his usual arrogance replaced by an unsettling pause. His eyes darted around, searching for support. Emma Blake, the defendant, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was certain that Turner's earlier mistakes were beginning to catch up with him, but this moment felt different. The truth was starting to unravel, and yet the detective's lies clung to him like a second skin. The weight of the courtroom's gaze was unbearable, but Turner pressed on, his voice now colder. "The evidence stands. My investigation was thorough," but even his own words felt hollow. The prosecutor's words echoed in Turner's mind long after they were spoken. "Detective, you claim the evidence is intact, but what about the key witness who has gone missing?" Turner's face tightened. He hadn't expected this angle, but it was too late to turn back now. Olivia Grant was relentless, pushing him further into a corner. "Tell us about the witness who disappeared the night of the crime. Were you aware that Luke Harris had fled the country before you even had a chance to speak with him?" The courtroom murmured, but Turner remained silent, his jaw clenched. Emma Blake shifted in her seat, staring at Turner. Was the detective truly hiding something? The doubt was becoming more than just a nagging feeling. It was beginning to take shape. Olivia, sensing the shift, took advantage of the silence. "You failed to properly investigate a key lead, didn't you, detective?" The stakes had never been higher, and Emma could feel the pressure mounting. The courtroom fell silent as Turner was confronted with his own failure. His usual confidence was replaced by a nervous flicker in his eyes. I didn't know about Luke Harris until after the fact," he muttered, his voice lacking conviction. Olivia Grant, sensing his vulnerability, pounced. "How convenient," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "The key witness who could have blown the case wide open, and you never bothered to follow up until it was too late?" Emma Blake's heart raced. The cracks in the detective's story were deepening. Turner, the man who was supposed to be the case's biggest asset, was now its greatest liability. But Emma also knew that if she allowed herself to believe too much in the detective's faltering, it might cost her. She clenched her fists, the reality of the situation setting in. This wasn't just about proving Turner wrong. It was about her life. And every second felt like a ticking clock. Emma Blake sat silently, her mind racing as Olivia Grant turned the screws even tighter on Turner. The prosecutor's words cut like knives, each accusation sharper than the last. "Tell me, detective, how is it that the key evidence was overlooked for days?" Turner opened his mouth but closed it again, his mind scrambling for a response. Emma watched with growing suspicion, wondering if the detective was hiding more than just a mistake. Olivia wasn't letting up, her tone unwavering. "Or perhaps, detective, you've been so caught up in covering up your mistakes that you've lost sight of the truth." The courtroom felt suffocating, the weight of the situation hanging heavily over Emma. A part of her was relieved to see Turner squirming, but another part was fearful of what the truth would ultimately reveal. Was there a deeper conspiracy, one that even the prosecutor was unaware of? The courtroom was on the edge of its seat when Olivia Grant dropped the next bombshell. "Detective Turner," she began, her voice smooth, but with a hard edge, "were you aware that key evidence from the scene was mishandled? Evidence that could have cleared Emma Blake?" The room froze. Emma's breath hitched as Turner stammered. I wasn't aware of that," he replied, but the doubt in his voice was palpable. Olivia, seeing his hesitation, pressed on. "Isn't it true, detective, that you were more concerned about protecting your reputation than doing your job?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Emma had thought Turner was just a sloppy investigator, but now it was becoming clear. He was hiding something. This wasn't just about mistakes anymore. There was something darker at play. The courtroom buzzed with tension after the bombshell revelation about the missing evidence. Olivia Grant, sensing the shift in momentum, leaned forward. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have a new piece of the puzzle," she declared, her voice calm but laced with underlying fury. All eyes turned toward the back of the room, where a new witness, Mark Evans, stepped forward. A tall man in his late 40s, wearing a dark suit and glasses, he held a file in his hands, shaking slightly. "I have something you all need to see," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. The room quieted, and even Detective Jack Turner, whose previously unshakable confidence had faltered, stood rigid, his hands gripping the side of the witness stand. Emma Blake's heart raced. She hadn't expected this new evidence from an unknown source. Could this be the break she had been hoping for, or would it destroy everything? The judge, Judge Samuel Harris, looked from Mark Evans to the defense and prosecution before nodding for him to proceed. Mark Evans cleared his throat and opened the file in his hands. "This is the missing piece of evidence," he announced. "A letter, one that was meant to be destroyed, but was accidentally overlooked by the investigating officers." Olivia Grant quickly moved to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor, I request the immediate admission of this evidence into the record," she said, her voice steady but urgent. Detective Jack Turner's face paled as Mark Evans handed the letter over to the judge. Emma Blake felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. What did this letter contain? Was this the smoking gun that could prove her innocence? Or was it something far worse? The air in the room grew thicker as the judge slowly examined the letter, the silence deafening. As the judge carefully read the letter, the room held its breath. After what felt like an eternity, Judge Samuel Harris set the letter down and looked up at Olivia Grant. "What is the significance of this document?" he asked. Olivia, a slight smile creeping onto her lips, turned to address the courtroom. "Your Honor, this letter was written by the victim, Sarah Williams, a few days before her death. In it, she names Emma Blake as the person she feared the most. This changes everything." The room fell silent. Emma Blake felt the floor drop out beneath her. How could this letter exist? She had never seen it before. Olivia Grant pressed on, her voice growing colder. "This letter is a confession of sorts. A final warning from the victim herself, implicating Emma in the murder." The courtroom erupted into murmurs, and Emma's heart pounded. She had no idea how Olivia had gotten her hands on this letter, but it was a bombshell. Could it be real, or was it part of a twisted game? Emma Blake's mind raced as the room swirled around her. "This is a lie," she whispered under her breath, but Olivia Grant heard her and responded instantly. "It's not a lie, Emma. It's the truth," she said with icy certainty. Emma stood up suddenly, her voice shaking but defiant. "I didn't write that letter," she protested, her eyes wild with desperation. "Someone is framing me. This letter, it's not real. You can't believe this." The room fell silent again. Olivia Grant remained calm, her eyes glinting with triumph. "We'll see what the jury believes, won't we, Emma?" Judge Samuel Harris raised his gavel and silenced the room, his voice heavy. "Order in the court." Emma's breath quickened. The walls were closing in. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, their disbelief cutting deep into her resolve. If this letter was real, everything she had fought for was slipping away. The judge called for a short recess, but the damage had been done. Emma Blake felt like she was drowning. She stumbled out of the courtroom, her legs weak, her heart pounding in her chest. Olivia Grant's words echoed in her mind. "It's the truth. It's the truth." Emma knew that no matter what she said now, that letter, if it was real, could bury her. She tried to steady her breath, but her hands trembled. Detective Jack Turner caught up with her in the hallway, his face unreadable. "You're in trouble," he said flatly. Emma glared at him, her voice low but cutting. "This is your fault, Turner. You let this happen." Turner didn't respond, his gaze flicking nervously to the door of the courtroom. Emma's mind raced. She couldn't let Olivia Grant win. She had to find a way out, a way to prove that letter was a lie. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized the truth was slipping further and further away. The courtroom had grown eerily quiet. Emma Blake sat in the defense chair, her heart pounding in her chest as Olivia Grant, the prosecutor, stood to deliver her closing arguments. Olivia's words dripped with venom, each one aimed squarely at Emma's integrity. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence is clear. The victim, Sarah Williams, named Emma Blake in her final moments as the one she feared the most. The defendant's attempt to deny this is futile." Emma could feel the weight of the entire courtroom pressing down on her. The eyes of the jury were locked on her, their expressions hardening. Olivia Grant paused for a moment, letting the words settle before continuing. "The prosecution has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Emma Blake is guilty of this crime. We ask that you find her guilty of murder." Emma's stomach turned. Every instinct in her screamed that Olivia was lying. But how could she prove it? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emma Blake barely heard Olivia Grant's voice as she spoke, her thoughts racing. Emma knew she had to fight back, but how? The stakes were impossibly high, and the evidence against her seemed insurmountable. Her eyes briefly met those of Detective Jack Turner, who was sitting in the gallery. Emma had trusted him, but now his presence felt like a curse. Olivia turned back to the jury, her voice smooth and persuasive. "Remember the letter. Remember the victim's last words." Emma Blake knew exactly what she was doing when she murdered Sarah Williams. Emma's blood ran cold at the mention of the letter. The room felt like it was closing in on her. She stood, her voice shaky but resolute. "Your Honor, I did not kill Sarah Williams. This letter is a fabrication, a lie. I've been framed." The words echoed through the courtroom, but Emma's plea felt weak compared to the tidal wave of evidence against her. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Samuel Harris called for a brief recess. Emma Blake stepped into the hallway, her legs shaking beneath her. The air outside the courtroom was heavy, and she felt like she was suffocating. Olivia Grant's words echoed in her mind, and the letter that seemed to have sealed her fate, haunted her thoughts. She looked up to find Detective Jack Turner standing a few feet away, his face tight with guilt. "You know this isn't over, right?" he said quietly. Emma turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you trying to say, Turner?" she asked, her voice trembling. Turner looked away, his jaw clenched. I might have missed something. You need to be careful." Emma felt her stomach drop. Turner's warning only deepened the uncertainty she felt about the entire investigation. But she couldn't afford to dwell on his words now. She had to focus. Olivia Grant was waiting to destroy her in court, and she had no choice but to fight back with everything she had. The courtroom reconvened, and the jury filed back in, the tension palpable in the air. Olivia Grant stood up, her voice smooth as she made her final remarks. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the case is clear. Emma Blake's lies are exposed, and the truth is undeniable. She killed Sarah Williams to cover her track." Emma felt her heart pound in her chest. She had been here before, trapped by a system that seemed stacked against her. But this time, she wasn't going to give up. She rose slowly, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "The truth is that I am innocent. I have been framed, and I will prove it." The room grew quiet, the intensity of Emma's declaration hanging in the air. Judge Samuel Harris raised his gavel, signaling for the jury to deliberate, but Emma's mind raced with the knowledge that she had just given everything she had left. The jury's deliberation lasted for hours, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Emma Blake sat in the defendant's chair, her hands trembling as she waited for the verdict. Olivia Grant sat across the courtroom, her eyes cold and calculating, seemingly confident in her victory. The air felt thick with anticipation, and Emma could hardly breathe. Finally, the jury returned, and Judge Samuel Harris called the room to order. Emma stood, her legs weak beneath her. Judge Harris looked at the jury with a stern expression. "Have you reached a verdict?" he asked. The foreman stood, holding a piece of paper. "We have, Your Honor." The room fell into a hushed silence as Emma waited, her heart pounding. The verdict was delivered with a single word: guilty. The floor dropped out from beneath Emma, and for the first time she felt completely powerless. The fight was over, and she had lost. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. The jury had returned, and the atmosphere had shifted. Emma Blake, in her late 20s, stood at her knees weak beneath her as Judge Samuel Harris called the room to order. Olivia Grant's triumphant gaze seemed to pierce Emma as the judge's voice echoed in the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" Thorman stood, a piece of paper in his hand, his face betraying nothing. Emma's heart pounded as she waited, each second feeling like an eternity. The foreman cleared his throat and looked directly at Judge Harris before speaking. "We have, Your Honor." Emma felt the weight of the words before they were even spoken. The jury had deliberated, and she had already guessed what the verdict would be. Her throat tightened as Judge Harris motioned for the foreman to continue. The words were coming. "Guilty," the foreman declared. Emma felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The word guilty echoed in Emma Blake's ears like a death knell. She had fought so hard to prove her innocence, but now it all seemed for nothing. Olivia Grant's smile grew wider as the verdict was read aloud, a cruel reflection of Emma's defeat. As the courtroom began to buzz with the murmurs of the spectators, Emma stood frozen, unable to move. Detective Jack Turner stood in the back, his face impassive, yet there was something in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? Emma couldn't tell. Olivia Grant stepped forward, her voice smooth as she addressed the room. "Justice has been served," she declared, her words laced with cold satisfaction. The camera zoomed in on Emma, her breathing shallow and rapid. She felt the walls of the courtroom closing in around her, every eye in the room on her, as if she were a spectacle for their judgment. Emma clenched her fists. She wasn't finished. Not yet. She still had a fight left in her, even if it meant going to the end. After the verdict was read, Emma Blake was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her head bowed, her body moving automatically. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the hall, a grim reminder of her fate. Olivia Grant and Detective Jack Turner watched from the doorway, their expressions hard. Emma could feel their eyes on her, but she refused to look back. There was a sense of finality in the air. She had lost the case. But as she was escorted down the hallway, a voice suddenly rang out behind her. "Emma, Andrew." She stopped, turning slowly. It was Mark Evans, the man who had revealed the missing evidence. His face was serious, his eyes filled with something that looked like regret. "I think you need to know something," he said, stepping closer to her. The words were heavy with implication. Emma blinked in surprise. Could it be that the truth was finally about to come out? Mark Evans looked over his shoulder before speaking again. "There's more to the story than you know. They're hiding something." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the break she needed? With Mark Evans' words still lingering in her mind, Emma Blake was thrown into a whirlwind of confusion. How could this be true? She had been convicted, and now Mark was suggesting there was more to the case than anyone knew. The guards led her into a holding cell, the cold metal door clanging shut behind her. Emma sat on the cot, her head spinning with the implications of Mark's revelation. Could it be that someone else was behind the murder? Olivia Grant and Detective Jack Turner had carefully crafted their case, but now there were cracks in the story. Emma had to figure out who was lying, and why. The problem was that she didn't know who to trust anymore. She had lost everything, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was something Olivia wasn't telling her. Something that could free her. She just had to find it. The night passed in a blur for Emma Blake. The next morning, she was summoned to court again. Judge Samuel Harris presided over the case once more, and Olivia Grant was already present, ready to secure the finality of her victory. But as Emma stood in front of the judge, a sense of resolve filled her. Mark Evans had given her something to hold on to, a glimmer of hope. She had one last chance. "Your Honor, I request that you reconsider the verdict," she said, her voice steady but loud enough to carry. Olivia Grant shot her a venomous look, but Emma stood firm. Judge Harris glanced at Olivia, then back at Emma. There was a pause. "The motion is granted," he said, his voice cool. Emma's heart leaped in her chest. This was it. The truth was coming. The case was far from over, and she wasn't done yet. The courtroom was packed once again, and the atmosphere was electric. Emma Blake had been granted a second chance, but now the moment of truth was upon her. She stood before Judge Samuel Harris, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. Olivia Grant was calm, but the tension in her jaw gave her away. Emma could feel the stakes rising with every second. "Today, we reveal the truth," she thought to herself, as the trial began anew. Olivia Grant had underestimated her. This time, Emma was ready. As Emma Blake took her seat, she felt a sense of resolve unlike before. Olivia Grant called her first witness, a key player in the new evidence. The witness was someone Emma had never expected. Mark Evans, the man who had given her the crucial information, now stood in the witness box. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes betrayed something, an apology. Emma clenched her fists. Was he going to betray her now? Her heart pounded as the room held its breath. Mark Evans spoke, but his words made Emma Blake's stomach drop. "I was coerced into revealing the evidence," he said, looking directly at Olivia Grant. The courtroom gasped, and Olivia Grant's face hardened. Emma could feel a spark of hope, but it was fleeting. Mark Evans continued, "The prosecution had no idea I was being manipulated. Olivia Grant's cold stare flickered for just a second, but she quickly regained control. Emma's mind raced. Was this the break she needed? The revelation hit Emma Blake hard, but she knew she couldn't let this moment slip by. Olivia Grant was losing her composure, something Emma had never seen before. With Mark Evans' testimony, Emma felt the weight of her fight lift slightly. But Olivia Grant was far from defeated. "We'll prove this was just another lie," she sneered, her eyes locked on Emma. Emma stood, facing the court with newfound determination. "Not this time," she whispered to herself. She was going to make sure the truth came out, no matter what. After hours of testimony and cross-examinations, Judge Samuel Harris called the trial to a close. The jury would deliberate overnight, but Emma Blake knew this was her last chance. She had fought every inch of the way, and now, with Mark Evans' testimony, there was hope. Olivia Grant shot her one final glare as she prepared to leave, but Emma stood tall. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom anymore. She was fighting for justice, for everything that had been taken from her. Emma knew it wasn't over. But tomorrow, the truth would finally have its day. The jury returned to the courtroom the next day. The tension was unbearable. Emma Blake stood, her heart pounding, as Judge Samuel Harris instructed them to deliver the verdict. The silence stretched, and every second felt like an eternity. Olivia Grant sat calmly, her face unreadable, but Emma could feel her victory slipping through her fingers. Please, she thought, let this be over. But deep down she knew nothing was certain. The fate of her future hung on what the jury would decide. Then the foreman stood. The foreman of the jury stood, and every eye in the room focused on him. Emma Blake could barely breathe. Woo the jury, find the defendant. The words hung in the air, as if time itself had slowed. Olivia Grant's face remained frozen in a neutral expression, but Emma could see a flicker of doubt. Could the jury have seen through the lies? Could they understand the truth that Mark Evans had revealed? Emma held her breath, waiting for the next words to determine her fate. The foreman's voice broke through the silence. Not guilty. Emma Blake felt the world shift beneath her. Her knees almost gave way as relief flooded through her veins. For a moment, she couldn't move. Olivia Grant's face was a mask of disbelief as she quickly turned her head, trying to hide her shock. Emma felt tears stinging her eyes, but she held them back. She had won. She was free. Her future was no longer a shadow. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, but all Emma could hear was her heartbeat. She had survived. The room felt lighter as the weight of the verdict settled in. Emma Blake was free, but she knew the fight had taken everything from her. As she left the courtroom, Detective Jack Turner caught up with her. "I should have believed you from the start," he said quietly. Emma turned to face him, her expression firm. "It doesn't matter now," she replied, her voice steady. "What matters is the truth was finally heard." Turner nodded, guilt in his eyes. Emma looked ahead, ready to start over, her past finally behind her. As Emma Blake stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of her journey hit her all at once. She had faced down lies, betrayal, and the darkness of the courtroom, but now the world seemed brighter. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air on her skin. Mark Evans had shown her the way, and now she was free to live her life. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about embracing the future, free from the shadows of the past. She turned and smiled, ready to rebuild her life, one step at a time.